Hello. Today we're talking about archaeological categories, but we kind of already have done this one. So I want to move on. And we were talking about the video for the Roman city that we watched. David McCulley is the guy that did that. We mentioned briefly that there are 4 of those videos. Only one really relates to this class. It's the Roman city, but he has one on castles, cathedrals, pyramids. But he does another book. He's an interesting guy. I don't know what he's doing now, but he did another book called Motel of Mysteries. Motel of Mysteries, which is, I don't know if we could plan this, but let's just see if we can find Motel of Mysteries. Because it does Motel of Mystery, okay. Ooh, is that a 12-minute thing on Motel of Mysteries? Well, anyway, here it is. I make no money from any of this, but Motel of Mysteries, 1979. But the whole, can you see inside? Are you going to let us see anything? No, they're not going to let you see it because it's not, it's 96 pages, but the whole premise of it is that archaeologists are digging in like 1,000 years from now or something. And they come down on this sign that says motel. It is Motel of Mysteries. And of course, then we recognize really where they are. They're in Las Vegas. Las Vegas completely covered over by sand. And they find a sign that says motel. And they begin to dig down. And they find a chamber, which of course we recognize as a motel room. And then they describe it. So they go into the chamber, right? It's basically poking fun at archaeologists because we often see things as being ceremonial, religious, sort of grandiose. Everything we find is grandiose, at least for a lot of people. They want to make it very special. So basically, he has a drawing. Here's what we found in this chamber. Well, we recognize it's a motel room. And he says we found a skeleton of a male on a ceremonial platform, which turns out to be a motel bed. And he has a communications device with the gods. That turns out to be the television. And his communication device that he's holding in his hands, like he died or whatever, it's the remote control for the television in his hand. And he's saying this is how they communicated with the gods. He was a priest or something, and this is a ceremony that they did. And then they said in another part of this chamber, inner part of the chamber, we found another skeleton in a ceremonial washing area. And this is a female, a woman. Basically, we recognize it's a woman in a tub in a small bathroom in a motel in Las Vegas. But they say, well, she's obviously a priestess. And here she's cleansing herself, to prepare herself to take part in these religious ceremonies. And then it shows a drawing of her dressed as a priestess. It's sort of the imagination of the archaeologist, the artist. And it shows her standing, and it has what we know is a toilet seat, which they think is a headdress. And so they have her head through through this part of the round part of the toilet thing. And then behind her is the lid of the toilet that they have it up around her like it's a sort of headdress, right? And this she's kind of wearing like a necklace or whatever is the toilet seat. And then around her forehead, this is my favorite part, around her forehead is a banner, is a label that reads, "Sanitized for your protection." Now, you may not get that part, but what they used to do in motels they don't do it anymore, probably because it's not sanitized for your protection, is that they used to, around the toilet seat, you would go into a motel, right, and they'd have this little paper sleeve that they would slide over the toilet seat that said sanitize for your protection. It was a little paper thing. So you'd have to take that off to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's kind of like what they do in motels, still in some motels, is they fold the toilet paper into a little V. Well, maybe you guys never stayed in motels, or at least ones that fold the toilet paper. But they fold the toilet paper into like a little V, just to kind of send you a signal that somebody was there and that they're paying that much attention to the toilet area, the bathroom area, that they folded the toilet paper for you, which of course is not productive, but it's just a signal. So that's kind of what this was. So they used to put a little label around there, sanitized for your protection. So she had that around her head. I wonder if we could. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about here. See this and this? They put a little paper thing around there. And here's one. Here's a nice one, yeah. So I don't know if anybody uses this anymore, but they used to put this kind of thing on there. Sanitize for your protection. So that's what she had around her forehead. Enough about that. But it's fun to poke fun at archaeologists who, I guess it's fun for me because, I hang out with a lot of archaeologists. And you read a lot of archaeology stuff, and it's always something ceremonial, something grandiose, something religious, some kind of ceremony or some sort of. Well, let's talk about archaeological categories, shall we? Everyone seems a little. I don't know what, maybe it's the weather. Everybody seems a little. Here in Florida, I saw it was like today's an emergency. They were telling people how to dress your children. Be sure to dress them in layers, because it could get very cold out there. We're going to have a high of about 60 today. While, people in Chicago are having a high of -20. And a wind chill of like -64 or something. And we've got a high of like 59, 60 with a wind chill, I don't know, probably get us down, who knows, into the 40s. How will we survive? No, it's an emergency. Well, they say I'm going to get used to it. I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt. I brought no jacket. I mean, some people are wearing parkas and stuff, hats. I mean, it's, there's a little breeze. Feels a little like fall to me. When it gets like our coldest winter part, it feels like sort of like you're just starting fall. This whole idea you got to mow your grass in January, that's kind of foreign to me. Anyway, archaeological categories, shall we? We shall. By the way, let me mention that on Friday, those of you in applied history, how many people are here in applied history? You're in applied history, you're in applied history, you're in applied history. We have a field trip Friday. Just a reminder. I'll send out an email later. By the way, on Saturday, those of you who are brave, those of you who are steadfast and true, those of you who are committed or should be committed, we're going to meet at my house at 9 a.m. and we're going to sort things and clean things and categorize things from the dig. So this is all part of archaeology, which this course is about. So that'll be at least what I define as fun. Of course, what I define as fun is not what most people define as fun. But anyway, that'll be Saturday morning. So Friday, the big trip. Saturday, they've told me people can get to my house. If it turns out you want to come but you don't have a ride, let me know. All right, we did talk about this last time. So let's go to periodization. You know, one of the ways in which archaeology has been categorized is through chronology. Like I told you, most archaeologists pick a geographic area that they kind of focus on, and many of them also pick a chronological period. So, for example, I have friends who might describe themselves as, really devotees of the Iron Age in the Near East. So Near Eastern Iron Age archaeology would be sort of their ball of wax, okay? That kind of thing. Other people be the Bronze Age, let's say. Well, what do we mean when we say Bronze Age, Iron Age, that sort of thing? That's what we want to talk about now. Basically, several periods of archaeological history or archaeological periods have been named by the kind of tools that you find, or what tools were made out of during that period. So, for example, the Neolithic Age. Perhaps you've heard of the Neolithic Age. You've probably heard of Stone Age. We're not going to talk about that, but that means the tools are made out of stone. Neolithic, they're also made out of stone. This is the New Stone Age, as it's sometimes called, about 7,000 to 4,000 BC. Here, the tools, and by this I mean what we would probably call a knife, scrapers, weapons of various kinds, made out of stone blades. How do you make those? You know, we found out here at I had it on the video there. I don't know if you saw the little video clip from the TV reporter did on us a couple of weeks ago there in Florida. We found an arrowhead, right? An arrowhead, as it's often called, or a projectile point made out of stone. The reporter asked me, "What is that? What is it made out of?" Well, it's made out of stone. It's made out of chert, or flint, sometimes it's called. This is a silicon dioxide with other stuff in it. And it can be, and the same with this period, the really sharp things were made out of chert, or sometimes it's called flint by some people. But it's a stone that's very hard, and it can be fractured, however, can be broken. Typically broken by hitting it with something like an antler, or some sort of, with percussion. You whack on it, and you whack a flake of it off. And as you do that, as you're flaking it off, that's what it's called, flaking the flint, flaking the chert. It leaves behind, of course, little chert pieces, but it's also breaking it into an edge, because it breaks somewhat like glass. It has what is called, I guess more technically, conchoidal fractures. Conchoidal means it's this sort of circular shaped fracture. You hit it, it breaks in little circles, kind of like little circly areas, and then that leaves a really sharp edge. And if you do it right, and you get little percussions all around the edge, which the people know how to do this, do it that way, then you can create a razor sharp weapon or tool. In fact, one of the things besides chert that's done this way is obsidian. Perhaps you've heard of obsidian, volcanic glass. Obsidian or volcanic glass is so sharp that in fact some surgeons use it instead of a steel scalpel.
It's the sharpest thing.
It's the sharpest thing, yes. And it's cuts. The cut that it makes is so fine, so precise that even some surgeons have, I don't know how many, but some surgeons use it. They prefer it when they're doing especially intricate.
Eye surgery a lot of the time.
You know what I'm always afraid of? The guy's going to sneeze. See, I've always thought about getting the eye surgery, but I'm thinking the guy's like shooting lasers in there, and they got like knives close to my eye. Let's just say, he doesn't mean to, but he just goes, he's got the scalpel, he's got the laser, and he just sneezes. Nothing I can do about it. Nothing he can do about it, right? Next thing you know, cut my eyeball in half. It's just stuff I think about. Maybe I shouldn't. That's why I haven't had the eye surgery. Does because I kind of like being able to see. Anyway, Neolithic, 7,000 to 4,000 BC. The New Stone Age. By the way, I show you these little guys off to the right. You see these little people? Little people, that's the proper way to say it, I understand now, politically correct. The little people on the screen. These are ceremonial. You know, it's archaeology. Religious, perhaps. Well, they're obviously humanoid forms. They're obviously effigies, as we might call them. And the eyes are made out of shells, you know, and they have like little, what I like about it is they have little tiny hands and little tiny arms and rather robust torsos and very long necks. So, at any rate, these were figures that were made to represent humans. These were found at Ain Ghazal in Jordan, which is now a suburb of Amman. I'm sure you couldn't, now this whole area is probably paved over with apartment buildings or something. But anyway, at the time, it was kind of on the outskirts of Amman when these were found. They made big news, and that was probably back in the 1980s when they were found. There's also the Chalcolithic period. Chalcolithic period has chalco, which comes for copper, and then lithos, the Greek word for stone. So this is 4,000 to 3,000 BC. 4,000 to 3,000 BC. So copper begins to be used, a metal. Now, you know, stone, of course, you can find just laying around places, right? Chert nodules are often in association with layers of limestone. You'll have layers of chert. And so that's fairly easy to find without a lot of mining techniques. You also don't need to know any metallurgy to make a tool out of it. You just have to learn how to fashion or shape it. But when you get to, say, using copper, you're not going to find copper in the form you use it. You're going to have to mine it out. It's usually in an ore. You're going to have to somehow take the copper, extract it out of the rest of the ore, separate it, melt it, or smelt it, and then pour it into a form. So that's all different. That's different kind of technology there, right? I mean, that's fairly sophisticated. You know, if I set you out in the middle of nowhere and say, hey, you know, there's a lot of iron ore, copper ore around here, you guys knock yourself out, make some tools, make some weapons, you'd have a hard time doing that, I suspect. It's not an easy thing to do, and you wouldn't know how to approach it, and so this is something they had to learn, a technology, if you will. All right, so that's sometimes called the Copper Age, or I suppose more precisely Copper Stone Age, but most people just call it the Copper Age, or they just call it the Chalcolithic Age. Then we have the Bronze Age. Bronze Age is next. Anybody know how bronze is, what composes bronze? What is bronze? You didn't think there was going to be a quiz today. What?
Isn't it like brass and tin?
It's copper and tin.
It's copper and tin. Yeah, brass is something different. It is copper with a little bit of tin. Because, you know, copper, you can make a tool or a knife or whatever out of copper. But you know what? It's not very durable. Copper is very, very soft. It's very malleable, which of course makes it valuable. Malleable is valuable for copper to make it into wire, because you can pull it and stretch it, or tubing, you know, for plumbing and stuff like that. It's excellent for tubing and wire and things like that. What it's not very good to be is like a knife. Or something, or an axe or something. You make a copper axe, you know, it's going to get dull pretty fast, and you're going to have to reshape it or sharpen it or whatever. But if you add just a small amount of tin to the copper, you now have made an alloy. Bronze is really an alloy of copper and tin. Now, copper sources, I won't say they're rare. Well, they're fairly rare, but you know, they became very important. For example, in the part of the world we're talking about here, the Sinai Peninsula, there's some copper there. the island of Cyprus. Anybody know what the chemical symbol? We got any chemists in here for copper? Periodic table? Cu, yes, Cu. Now here's the bonus question. What is it for tin? See this one. Sn, very good. Give yourself a bonus point. You must be taking chemistry.
Played a lot of RuneScape.
That's good. What is it? RuneScape? Is that what it is? It's a game? It's not only a game? Well, anyway, yeah, so copper and tin. So copper, of course, Cyprus, it gets its name Kupris, or the name copper, from the name of the island, Cyprus, because that was the main source in the ancient world was copper. It came from Cyprus, okay? Tin, the sources are even rarer for tin. England has tin. Many people think the Phoenicians probably made their way to England, although we don't have definite proof of that, very early on searching for tin, or they heard it's there, or tin trade. Tin trade. So this is another thing you can study, sort of related to archaeology, would be trade routes. Where is tin located? Where is copper located? We know we've got bronze at these various places. How do these people get what it takes to make the bronze? Also in archaeology you can find, like smelting, mining activities, smelting activities where the stuff is actually produced. Well, bronze then is a great improvement. It's a technological advantage. If you have bronze weapons and tools, you're far ahead of your neighbors or your enemies that only have copper. So now we have the Bronze Age. Bronze Age lasts, as you can see here, from 3000 to 1200 BC. So that's a long time. That's 1800 years, right? Approximately. I'm rounding all these dates off. Remember, this also then coincides with the first written records, which take place around 3000 BC. So a lot of stuff changes in the ancient world around 3000 BC. We get writing, we get bronze technology. And as we've already said, bronze is copper and tin being the most scarce of the two substances. So that has led people to search for tin mines and tin sources and that sort of thing to work on trade. Well, okay, so we find now, for example, pottery. There is some Neolithic. There's pottery. There is actually pre-pottery Neolithic, and then there's pottery during the Chalcolithic, and there's pottery obviously during the Bronze and the Iron Ages and on, because pottery becomes one of the main things we find definitely in the Middle East. One of the main things we find in many excavations, we're finding it every time we dig out at that site in Florida, which is more rare here in North America than it would be, say, in the Middle East. But pottery then serves as the main thing that people would eat out of, cook from, store things, whereas we use plastic and cardboard and I don't know, metal. I don't know. We store various things, but if we're going to cook, we use metal, like metal for cook pots and things, like a soup, like a big thing to boil water. We're probably using all metal, or a lot of metal, and other storage stuff is plastic. That all of that for them was pottery. You would store grain in a pottery container, right? Or oil, or wine, or even water. Those would be stored in clay jars or pottery, right? You would cook in pottery, cook jars, cook pots, to boil, say, grains, because they're often eating wheat, barley, things like that. So you need to boil that stuff. I don't know if you tried to eat, say, wheat without cooking it. Not too appealing. So wheat is, pulverized and then made into a flour, and then the flour is baked, typically. But otherwise, you boil it, make it into a stew or something like that, okay? So that was very common, but that's all clay pots. Now we divide these periods, the bronze period, we subdivide it into early, middle, and late. Early, middle, and late. Now it's subdivided beneath that as well. Early bronze 1, early bronze 2, early bronze 3, sometimes early bronze 1A, and so on. So we're not going to go through all of those. But this is what archaeologists have done. That's periodization to help us categorize. Really a lot of archaeology is not only finding stuff, but then categorizing, labeling, recording, and comparing the stuff that you find. All with the aim of trying to understand what the people were doing who made it, and to understand ultimately the people behind the objects. All right, that's really, that gets a little bit tougher, but that's also our goal. Well, early bronze, roughly 3,000 to 2,000, middle bronze 2,000 to 1,500, late bronze 1,500 to 1,200. Now, just to give you some idea, those of you, have any of you ever heard of what's called the Bible? The Bible. I recommend it to you sometime. But in the Bible, for example, if we try to put events of the Bible into this, since we're talking about the Middle East here, Abraham, the earliest anyone puts Abraham is around 2100 BC. So Abraham is definitely early bronze. He's living in the early bronze, the later part of the early bronze period. The time of, say, Joseph, a lot of the patriarchs after Abraham is in the middle bronze. Okay? And if you want to know the Exodus, some people say the Exodus didn't happen. I'm not one of those people. But those who say it happened, they say it happened in the late bronze period. Okay? Just in general. Around 1447. Some people say around 1270. But either way, late bronze. Okay? Just to give you a little connection there, right, historically, with something that maybe you know about. Now, I took a picture here. Here's something that we found. We found this on a dig I was doing in Jordan. See that? There's a projectile point for you. Looks different than the one we found here in Florida, which was a flat stone blade. This is a trilobate metal projectile point, or arrowhead, I guess you could call it. It has 3 blades, one on either side, one down. You can see the top one there the best. And then it has a sleeve at the end where you would actually put the arrow, the shaft of the arrow, into the end. Okay? So that could do some damage. That's a bronze arrowhead or projectile point, dated to the Bronze Age, obviously. Now, sometimes we find bronze objects in later periods. This one might actually not be from the Bronze Age. By our dating method, it might be into the Iron Age, which makes me want to remind you that when the Bronze Age started, it doesn't mean that all stone tools are left behind. There's still stone tools in the Bronze Age. And it doesn't mean that when the Iron Age begins that all bronze tools and weapons are left behind. Okay? So, anyway. So this was Scythian. You can look the Scythians up. They're mentioned by Paul in the New Testament. The Scythians had a reputation of being barbarian, I suppose we might say, wild warriors who lived to kill people and to go to battle and to ride horses and stuff. This is the Scythians were warriors. Somebody ought to make a movie about Scythian, the Scythian warrior. Everybody ignores them. But these guys, they would ride on their horses, right, into battle, and they wouldn't want to stop. When they were on the move, they didn't carry any food with them. You know what they would sometimes eat when they were in the midst of battles and things? They'd actually cut their horses and drink their blood. I believe they did, yeah. I guess that guy decided he didn't want to join our class. Well, I guess we're out of time, unfortunately. So be looking for more announcements.